the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, President Rodrigo Duterte agrees to keep Metro Manila under the general community quarantine while Cebu City shifts to a modified quarantine status. Also, Vice President Leni Robredo says she's willing to work with the government to help fight COVID-19. And how will the government assist thousands of ABS-CBN employees who stand to lose their jobs due to the denial of its franchise? Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque joins us on the show. After more than 2 weeks under the government's strictest lockdown, Cebu City is finally easing quarantine measures starting today. Malacanang announced that Cebu City will shift to a modified enhanced community quarantine, or MECQ. That's despite a recent surge in infections, which had more patients experiencing severe symptoms and needing critical care. Meanwhile, Metro Manila will stay under general community quarantine, or GCQ, until July 31. The rest of the country is placed either under medium risk or low risk modified GCQ. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque. Secretary Roque, welcome to the show and thank you for your time.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure, Pinky.
All right, so NCR still under GCQ. But this is, sir, in spite of the recommendation of UP experts to shift to a more strict status, which would have been MECQ. Tell us more about the President's decision, Secretary Roque.
That's right. Professor Rai of the UP study group on COVID actually recommended to the President that we shift to MECQ. And it was after he showed slides that our R0 actually is more than one, which means that a person who has caught the disease is infecting more than one person. And he said that it can be reined in. He actually validated what I said in one of my press conferences, for which I got so much flack, that we should actually take steps to at least attempt to beat the forecast made by the UP group. Because if we beat the forecast, that means less people get sick. And he said that we were able to do it in Cebu. How? Through the ECQ and the MECQ. And that's why his recommendation, one of three, was to put Metro Manila in MECQ. And at that point, the President actually agreed. He actually said, okay, let's put Metro Manila under MECQ for 2 weeks. At which time, Secretary Galvez, the chief implementer, actually spoke up and seconded by DILG Secretary Año. And they both argued that the Metro Manila mayors have actually confirmed that they will be more vigilant in deciding to resort to localized lockdown, to granular lockdown. And they have also said that we're working on a common ordinance for all the cities in Metro Manila to provide penalties for those who will not follow minimum health standards, such as the wearing of masks, washing of hands, and observing social distancing. And that the two argue that Metro Manila should be given a chance because everyone knows that majority of our GDP still comes from Metro Manila. And at this point, it was important to open up the economy. That was when the President reconsidered. And Professor Rai actually said, well, that's also one of the three options that we presented to the President. GCQ, but with more with intensified implementation of the rules regulating GCQs.
So, ibig sabihin pala, Secretary Roque, muntik na talaga tayong mag-MECQ.
Yes, the President, after hearing Professor Ranjit Rai, said, yes, let's impose MECQ in Metro Manila for 2 weeks. And the two secretaries had to argue passionately. Basically, they were saying, give the Metro Manila mayors the opportunity to show exactly what they can do by way of localized lockdowns and by way of achieving behavioral change so that their constituents will actually practice the Holy Trinity of masks, washing hands, and social distancing.
If would it be right to say, Secretary Roque, that it's like we're on a period of trial right now na kapag tumaas yung mga kaso, in 2 weeks, rather after 2 weeks or after July 31, pwede tayong bumalik sa MECQ?
That's what the President said. Okay, let's give it another 2 weeks. And what we want to achieve in these 2 weeks is we need to get out of the plateau as far as case doubling rate is concerned. We are stuck in 7 to 10 days, and that's why we're perpetually in GCQ, no? But if you have 7 to 10 days of case doubling rate, that means in 7 to 10 days, the number of cases will double in Metro Manila. No? And that's what we're trying to avoid, because after all, in some countries, they've already achieved zero transmission. No? But I think one of the strategies that we are now implementing is that for those who don't have facilities for home isolation when they are asymptomatic or mild, that they will really be transferred to isolation centers. No,
Yeah.
That's something that other countries have implemented from the very beginning. No, but maybe because at that point we did not have the numbers of isolation center, but we do have now. We have capacity in our many We Heal as One centers, as well as the Ligtas centers maintained by the local government units.
And it's good we talk about that a little later, Secretary. Just wanted to ask you, what would be the indicators, for example, in terms of number of tests that would average daily for us to go back to MECQ? For example, sir, we're looking at what? An average of about 1,000 cases, I don't know, maybe in the past 9, 10, or 11 days. My question is, kung magpatuloy ho kaya itong 1,000 average cases in the next 2 weeks, would that be a good enough indicator to go back to MECQ?
Well, again, we're looking at case doubling rate, not just the sum total of new cases. No? And we're also looking at critical care capacity. And of course, Metro Manila has reached dangerous levels when it comes to ICU bed capacity. No? That's why it's for real. The possibility of reverting to a stricter quarantine is for real. We are given 2 weeks to give it our best. And I hope the mayors will do their best and the people will do their best, particularly on the non-pharmacological solutions to the disease, which is actually the Holy Trinity.
And of course, Cebu, just very quickly now, on a less strict status. What's the situation there, sir, now, and how was the president? Was he quite happy with what the task force or Secretary Cimatu has done so far?
As far as the classification of Cebu is concerned, we actually gave a premium on the recommendation of Secretary Cimatu, as well as the Chief Implementer, Secretary Galvez, and Secretary Anyo. Cebu could have been even more relaxed, no? But Secretary Anyo in particular observed that the deaths have only begun to slow down. Remember, in the past few days, we've had in excess of 10 deaths. There was a day it was 46. I think there was even one day when it was like 60. But most of it were attributable to Cebu City. So although case doubling rate, as Professor Rai himself observed, has declined in Cebu, and critical care more or less has eased because USEC Vega has now rationalized the allocation of ICU beds and beds throughout the city. It was deemed best to put it only on MECQ and not yet on GCQ, because we don't know if the trend will hold. Because if you look at the data of Cebu, it's almost like a roller coaster. Sometimes the death will shoot up, sometimes it will not, meaning that intense community transmission is still ongoing in Cebu. So the better option is to put it on MECQ for the next 2 weeks, but we will see after 2 weeks if they can graduate already to GCQ.
Before we move on to possibly what Secretary Duque said earlier, flattening the curve and then correcting that to bending the curve, sir, was there any more appeal with the IATF with regards to the quarantine status?
Yes, there were 4 appeals. No? And I remember there was an appeal from Bacolod City, Iloilo City, Bulacan, and Davao City. And all of them were because they were classified to have more stringent quarantine. They were already on MGCQ, and their proposed classification was going to be GCQ. So we had to re-examine the data. And there were some instances when, even if the data supports that it should be GCQ because of case doubling time, we took note of the economic risk, and we also took note of the capacity of the local government units to actually resort to localized lockouts, and the political will not to actually implement the non-pharmacological means by which to prevent the spread of the disease. So These 4 cities were supposed to have been elevated back to GCQ, but on appeal, they were allowed to remain on MGCQ. Yeah, MGCQ, yes.
Secretary Roque flattening the curve. Secretary Duque said that yesterday, and then he corrected it, bending the curve. We are at almost 59,000. Where are we, sir? Are we bending the curve even? I mean, if you look at 1,000 cases on an average daily for the past 9, 10, or 11 days, would you characterize that as bending the curve?
I think we started flattening sometime in when we relaxed ECQ, immediately after ECQ, because it shows that ECQ was very, very effective. No? ECQ and MECQ. But I think we've had more cases since then because we've opened the economy. And I think what's more important for people to realize is we have tremendously expanded our testing capacity. We have expanded not just our capacity, but the number of actual testing that we're doing. We're hitting 25,000 a day now these past few days. So I think it's a foregone conclusion that with 25,000 a day of testing, we will find more positives, which is not necessarily bad, because when you find the positives, you trace the individuals with whom they had contact and you isolate everyone as a means of preventing the further spread of the disease. And I think what we will see in the next few days is that while the numbers will increase, over time, it will slow down. The case doubling rate will slow down because we are now putting mild and asymptomatic individuals who have no capacity to isolate themselves in their homes in healing centers and in ligtas centers. And over a period of time, perhaps these next 2 weeks, and we're really hoping that it happens, no, we will see a significant decrease in the number of cases. We might even come close to actually flattening the curve if people take heed of the warning made already by the president that he will not hesitate to revert back Metro Manila in particular, to a more stringent quarantine if need be.
So to clarify, Secretary, you're saying that we flattened the curve, huh? That's what you're saying?
No. That's what I'm saying. Immediately after ECQ and MECQ, we noticed that we have somehow experienced decline in the number of cases. In other words, at some point we were starting to flatten the curve, no? At some point, no? But unfortunately, because of the opening of the economy and also because of intensified testing, it did not continue. The flattening did not continue, no? But it's not necessarily negative altogether because, as I said, the tremendous increase in testing, actual testing being conducted in testing capacity, has given us, number one, the means to detect where the enemy is, and we now have the space for isolation, and of course, now we know better on how to treat them.
Which
so
I
we've
understand.
not actually flattened the curve.
Okay.
We slowed it down tremendously as a result of ECQ and MECQ, but with intensified testing and I guess with the reopening of the economy, the cases increased anew.
Okay, so did we bend the curve? Would that be a correct way to describe it, sir?
At some point, I think Secretary Duque said it was bending because we somehow succeeded, no? Really, well, we actually succeeded in halting the tremendous increase of diseases because of ECQ and MECQ. I think that's a fact. Again, going by the UP prediction, we should have had millions of cases, 6.3 million, no, if we did not resort to the ECQ and MECQ. But it's always a debate of when do we open the economy so people will have livelihoods. We could survive the disease, but actually have extreme poverty amongst us, no? And what we're saying is it can be done. It can be done through intensified testing, tracing, treatment. It can be done through localized lockdown. It can be done through behavioral change, the Holy Trinity, which I referred to. And it can be done if we keep the vulnerables at home. Now, Pinky, the news that the ICUs are getting filled, they're getting filled with elderly.
Yes.
And, I'm going to be candid about this. I know the elderly will get mad at me, but I get many emails complaining, no, from elderly saying, how dare you tell us how to live our lives? We are elderly. We know better, no? So when we want to go out, we will go out. When we have to go to church, we will go to church. We will go out and somehow take a breath of fresh air. I don't know why, but one woman was saying, I want a breath of fresh air in the malls. I don't know why. I actually got in no? I think people, we've seen what happened in concern. You really have to stay home. And that's the crucial part of our strategy now. Let's keep the mortality down by keeping the vulnerables at home. It's not just the elderly, it's also those with comorbidities and the youth, because the youth are the tried and tested spreaders.
Oplan Kalinga, you talked about that a while ago. Secretary Roque, can we clarify that? Because you were asked about this yesterday. Secretary Anyo was also the first one who actually talked about this. Ano ho bang mangyayari sa Oplan Kalinga? Sino ho bang mangunguna? Because there's so much controversy or questions about this right now. Tell us the process, sir.
Yes, in the first place, the national government is not as well equipped as the local governments in actually knowing where the asymptomatics and the mild cases are, and in persuading them to go to either LGU established Ligtas centers or national government established We Heal as One centers. So this has to be LGU-led. Now, we have a law which requires individuals to report cases of individuals suffering from infectious diseases, RA 11332, and the procedure should be individuals in the barangay, either be it barangay officials, your neighbors, or the sick himself should report to the local DOH that they are infected. And Oplan Kalinga is a means by which we will offer free, not only free board and lodging and an air-conditioned facility with a graduation certificate to boot at the end of 2 weeks, but we will offer to pick them up and bring them to the appropriate center. That's why it's called Oplan Kalinga. But of course, at the time when we have a pandemic, the critics of government always want to weaponize everything, and they're now saying this is the new Tokhang, where the police will forcibly remove individuals from the community. No, there has to be a reporting, and if they can't go to the centers themselves, we will pick them up. It's a free transportation service, in fact, no, to bring them to the isolation centers that we have prepared for them. Now, Pinky, I stress, this is crucial to our success. I think the reason why we haven't flattened the curve is so many of the asymptomatics and mild ones are staying at home without their own rooms, without their own bathrooms, infecting the community as a result.
Let me cut you there, sir. While that could be true, ano po, because let's go back to months ago. Yun ho ang sinabi ng gobyerno, hindi ho ba manatili kayo sa bahay? There were questions way back, Sec, no? Let's be honest about it. Paano naman yung 10 na nasa isang bahay? How can they quarantine? Pero let's leave that. So, paano po in a situation na pumunta ang LGU? So, ganito po mauuna ang LGU doon, pero kasama po ang pulis. Tama ho?
Hindi necessarily. It doesn't have to be the case. Kasi alam mo, ang primary workers natin in the community, the primary tracers, in fact, are the barangay health workers. So it can be the barangay health workers, it can be the barangay captain, it can just be friends. Pero actually, what it is a free transportation service. It's a shuttle service. You don't have to physically bring yourself if you have no means. We will pick you up and bring you to an air-conditioned isolation
facility
center with free lodging and Wi-Fi. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Secretary Anyo emphasizes there's always Wi-Fi in the centers.
Secretary Roque, papaano po? So, naiintindihan ko, I know where you're going, no? Meron pong positive sa isang bahay. Wala silang sariling kwarto, wala silang sariling palikuran, may kasama po silang mga seniors or bata. Yun po ang kailangan dalhin sa facility. My question is, sir, papaano po pag ayaw nila?
Well, pag ayaw nila, there is still the concept of police power kasi. And police power is really, among others, to promote public health. No? That's the most basic foundation of police power. I think we can still compel them, but I don't think it will be in the nature as if they are being treated as criminal. No? We'd like to think that these are matters that can be settled in the barangay. For the longest time, we've had a barangay justice system. I think the barangay has the necessary means and experience to persuade these individuals to go. But make no mistake about it, if the person is completely adamant and he is there infected and could be a spreader, then I think he can still be forcibly brought to an isolation center if need be. That's the earliest foundation of police power in promoting public health. But as I said, I don't think that will really happen because, let me put it this way, no? We're offering air-conditioned facilities with Wi-Fi and free boarded lodging. Come on. And in the next few weeks, we're going to actually show our people in our press briefings how the conditions in these Wihilas One centers
Look,
are.
yeah.
No? It's actually a hotel experience.
Okay.
So why would you say no to a hotel experience?
But there could be those instances, no, Sec, because even Senator Drilon was saying, in essence, he said, you go here, the issue is you could run afoul with our right to unreasonable search and seizures. And I think another senator said, no warrant, no entry.
Well, as I said, no, we have a long experience with the barangay justice system, with mediation. And I think the fact that we have relied on the barangays as the basic unit of governance on the ground level, we don't really need to use force in compelling individuals. No? But we need to explain to them that they cannot remain in the community because they pose a threat to public health.
And simple, ha, sir? Kahit ayaw nila, is this right? They will have to. Tatanggalin po sila sa kanilang mga bahay at dadalhin sa quarantine facility. Whether, even if they don't want to do that. Is that clear, sir?
If there is no facility for isolation, they will have to go and submit themselves to the isolation center. And Pinky, hindi ba obvious na ito ang dahilan kung bakit hindi pa natin na-flatten ang curve? This is the thing that we have not done before. In fact, siguro pagkakamali nga na talagang hindi natin lininaw na home quarantine does not mean just staying at home and infecting everyone else at home. No?
Yeah.
Dapat from the very beginning, it has been emphasized, kailangan may sarili kang kwarto at bathroom. Since actually, this is not a new policy. It's been in April. But it's only now that we're disseminating na dapat may sarili kang kwarto at bathroom. Kasi nga naman, what kind of isolation is that if you infect everyone else?
It becomes useless. Yeah,
it becomes
useless. A useless quarantine.
But I think if people cooperate, I think in the next 2 weeks, we will see a substantial flattening. No? Because this is something that we have not really implemented. And I'm happy, in a way, I'm thankful there is controversy here because we can now talk about it.
Yeah.
And ang aking pakiusap, people just sit down and think about it. Ito siguro talaga yung dahilan. Kaya kahit anong ginawa natin, hindi natin napapabagal. No? Kasi nga, miski kayo nasa bahay, marami ka pa rin nahahawa. Yung mga nahahawa mo, naghahawa ng iba.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to talk about it, Secretary Roque, because the intention seems to be good. We really need to isolate those kahit na po asymptomatic. Dahil, this has been a work in progress. In fact, even the 4 czars, 3 of them were just really assigned very recently during your press briefing last week. All right. I wanted to add this too because Vice President Leni Robredo wrote you a letter and she gave suggestions on how government can improve its COVID-19 response. Meron ho bang suggestions si VP that government may implement?
Well, I'm about to send my response to her letter today, and my response is all her suggestions we've long implemented. Now, it will depend on VP Leni if she wants to publicize the letters. I did think it was within my responsibility to publicize her letter. And but definitely my answer today would be, thank you very much. IATF has long recommended in fact, all of your suggestions.
Did they recommend
There's nothing new in her recommendation.
How about the service contracting po dun sa mga jeep instead of boundary?
Matagal na po yung suggestion at pinag-aaralan. It's not the first time it was suggested. It's been there out in the open. So it's not something that was suggested for the first time. But that's been long studied and mukha namang mahirap talaga ma-implement yan, no? Because many of the jeepney drivers are in fact self-employed, no? So as far as the bus drivers are concerned, matagal na po yung suggested. It's not the first time that it was brought up. But in any case, we appreciate all her comments. We actually disseminated it to the line agencies. We had a discussion on her letter in the IATF itself. And there was one important input that she had, which was discussed extensively, and that was to include the League of Cities as members of IATF. But it's not as if there's not been any consultations with local government units. We always consult them. In fact, we meet with Metro mayors regularly. No? But it was agreed that as is, consisting of 33 heads of agencies, the meetings of IATF take anywhere from 8 to 10 hours a day. And the consensus was if we were to allow the mayors to join us regularly, as a matter of course, then we would be meeting 24 hours a day. So the resolution was we will just institutionalize the fact that we use local government officials as resource persons in IATF meetings.
And I think I did read somewhere, sir, just on the last note kay VP Leni, that she would be willing to work with government on this. Would this be in the horizon, sir?
We've welcomed all her contributions. In fact, there was a government official who wanted her investigated for doing all the relief work that she was doing. The president fired him. So I don't think it's an issue if she can help. The president has sent a very strong message to his supporters not to interfere with anyone who wants to offer help by firing that public official. No? So I think she can do whatever she has been doing, and it is very much appreciated.
All right, ABS-CBN, they already announced layoff will begin end of August. By the end of August, meron ho bang plano ang gobyerno para sa mga empleyado ng ABS-CBN, Secretary Roque?
Well, lahat po ng programa ng DOLE, meron tayong tupad, no? Meron tayong yung special program for COVID-19, yung mga nawalang ng trabaho, no? Meron tayong mga loans na binibigay ng Pag-ibig, ng SSS. Meron tayong mga livelihood loans na binibigay ng DTI, ng DA. Lahat po yan can be availed of by employees of the ABS-CBN. No? Siguro ang gagawin ko is kukontakin ko si Secretary Bello. And Secretary Bello, I will encourage him to open a one-stop shop siguro doon sa ABS-CBN to assist those who will be retrenched. No? I will suggest to Secretary Bello, no? Dahil iba naman ang circumstance sa ABS-CBN talaga, wala silang prangkisa at mawawalan talaga sila ng trabaho, and rather than silang pupunta sa mga government agencies, I will just suggest, because remember, there's a sitting secretary there, no? Magpadala na lang ng one-stop shop.
And what can they avail?
No? Yun nga po, lahat po ng benefits that an ordinary Filipino can avail when they lose their job during this time of COVID, they can also avail. Now, let me just rectify an earlier statement that I made. Ano mo pa ulit-ulit ko sinasabi that I will not be who I am without ABS-CBN.
Right.
And in fact, I remember it was the Iraq War that was the trigger that gave me exposure, no, to the public. And it was through ANC, Jing Magsaysay. And yes, I owe it to you also, Pinky. It was you and Jing Magsaysay, always in tandem, no, when we were discussing the legality of the decision to join the, what is that? The Desert Storm Initiative, no? Which I said was actually illegal because the Operation Desert Storm without a Security Council authorization was contrary to the UN Charter. I still remember the issue.
You remember a lot of things. Secretary, was there ever a time that you tried to mediate between ABS and the president, sir?
Yes, and I don't hide that. Why? Because I was already spokesperson. I knew that ABS-CBN had the widest reach in terms of broadcast capacity, and I knew that they were crucial to any dissemination activity. And I succeeded 3 times, 2 of which were publicly shown on TV. The first time was when the president announced me actually as a spokesperson. I had Maria with me in Davao because Maria and I had a TV show actually, no? I was a regular guest in the Campanilla, and later on I had my own show in DZMM, which is Conectodo, and Maria was my co-host. And the president announced, it was captured on camera, it was broadcasted, and the president said, I'm now bearing the hatchet with ABS-CBN, and she even shook the hand of Maria. Second time was also on TV a few months later. He said, of course, I'm now, again, he said, I've made peace with ABS-CBN. I just asked them to be my partners in the campaign for federalism. And a third time was not already shown, but I was able to persuade the president to let me inform Speaker Alvarez then that it was okay to act on the ABS-CBN franchise. And I said, okay, tell him, call him. But it was too late because the following day there was already a coup in the House of Representatives. So all this I did because I knew media in general was indispensable to what I was doing, sending the messages from the president to the people, but because they were the largest media outfit, and you cannot do without the largest media outfit. I think that's a matter of record, and that's why it hurts me when I notice that the ABS-CBN itself is distributing social cards against me now. So parang, ano ba yan? Paulit-ulit ko lang ang sinasabi, may utang na loob ako, tapos ganyan pa. I don't think they can find a stronger supporter within the administration for ABS-CBN, but other than me.
But in the recent past, Secretary Roque, in the past maybe a month or so, did you try talking to the president about the issue of ABS-CBN?
I did, and that's when he said neutral nga ako. And I was even saying, can't you just, tell our allies, go ahead and support. And sabi naman niya, well, that's the most I can do to be neutral, Kasi I don't want naman people to think that I'm trying to win a favor from ABS-CBN because they want a franchise, ganyan, But sabi niya, tama na yung maging neutral ako. Honest na yan. I have publicly said that I have forgiven them. It's not every day that the president says that. In fact, his pronouncement that he has accepted the apology of Carlo came before he forgave the Ayalas and the MVP, So he really felt it was enough to be neutral on the issue.
And just very quickly, because I can't delve on this too much, sir, wala na po tayong oras. Please excuse me. Yung pong dismantling oligarchs, yun ho ba ay still you stand by the, even after what already came out, the unedited version, that it's still not the Lopez family, sir?
Well, the problem is, number one, I was not in Hulo, and I really cannot comment if there was any editing done. But next time, I will give a priority to being with the president, so I will personally hear what he has to say, even if it means missing my press briefing. At that point, kasi last Monday, I had to weigh in the options very carefully because the flight going to Hulo with the Secretary of National Defense was at 12, and my press briefing was at 12. And I opted, now I regret it, I opted to discharge my functions as press secretary and do my Monday briefings on that particular day. So I'm not of any help on that issue because I was not physically present then.
Okay, mabilis lang po, Sec Roque, I hope you don't mind. Yung frequency ng Channel 2 sa radyo at telebisyon, ito ho ba ay pwedeng i-assign sa iba? Pwede ho ba itong kunin ng ibang entity? Is that a possibility, sir? Because
I think it can now be awarded by the NTC, That's the function of the NTC, and we leave it to the NTC what will happen to the frequency.
Are you of this, do you support LA Congressman Villafuerte's House resolution saying that the use of the frequency of Channel 2 and its radio can be used for distance learning?
Well, of course, any frequency can be used for distance learning. So it's up to the NTC. If the NTC says so, we will respect that because it is a quasi-judicial body.
But would government want that frequency? Does government want it?
Right now, we have 13. We have 4. But it may not be sufficient because we have K to 12, And there's also the possibility that some institutions of higher learning may require it because yesterday, Chair Popoy,
Yeah, I heard that, sir.
said na 40% of public universities and colleges don't have access to Wi-Fi. So I would say that frequencies are now crucial for education now at the time of COVID-19.
And government may want it, to be clear.
I don't know what the position is right now. I have to confer. I have not heard of any proposals emanating either from Secretary Briones or Chair Popo that they want the frequencies of ABS-CBN and DZMM for blended learning. Let me check.
All right. Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque. Sir, I wish we had more time but we don't. But maraming salamat po sa inyong oras as usual, sir.
Well, next time it will be 2 hours with you, Pinky.
Thank you to Presidential
Okay.
Spokesperson Harry Roque. Take care, sir.
Thank you.
And
Bye-bye.
thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.